Okay, today's study tip says, reduce your lecture notes to an outline or diagram. This will help you to decide which items are worthy of being on the outline. This is a way to prioritize information. Use a computer so you can easily add and delete items. Have you done this? Made an outline? A lot of people like outlines. I kind of feel like the PowerPoints are the outline, right? Because I say a lot more on each side than, I do read the lines, but I also say a lot more. But for you, maybe some of the stuff can be changed, edited, or writing all the slides from memory. That's a good one. I'm a real visual person, so when students say, what are you asking for in this question? I'll say, remember that slide where there's, a picture of the battery in the corner? Like they don't know what I'm talking about. That's fine, but visual learners, this is your chance to take pictures, okay? So make the outline. It's like a picture. And of course, everyone has to prioritize. That's kind of what the study guide is for, to remind you of what's most important, and we talk about these a lot. These are going to be the short answer questions. Making the outline is very important. So if you say, hey, let's, in our study group, you do an outline, that's fine, but just so you know, you won't learn the stuff as well if you don't make the outlines. So part of making the flashcards and making the outlines and all that stuff is learning by making them and choosing what goes on it. Okay, chapter 18, digestive system, part 2. Last time we did the GI tract, we started with the mouth, talked about the small intestine a lot, the large intestine a lot. We ended up with that poor guy Michael getting giardia. Today's topic is digestive system part 2. We're going to do the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas, and then talk about the final digestion and absorption at the very end of the tract. Okay? I'm already dehydrated. Let's see. The microscopic anatomy of the liver. Do you remember this? Oh yeah, so yes. So blood flows, can you see these arrows here? Blood flows from the hepatic portal vein, here's the hepatic portal artery, to the central vein. Do you remember this? Everything flows through the liver, okay? Directly from the digestive system. Everything goes to the liver to be cleaned. That's a good thing to do, right? Everything. And our livers are giant, right? This going the opposite direction to make up the portal triad. Here are the bile ductules. Remember that? What else do I want to know here? All the hepatocytes are here. Hepato, of course, hepat means what? Liver. If you look up close, you can see the direction of the movement. They go opposite direction. The bile is made in the hepatocytes and goes this way, and then the portal vein and the hepatic artery both go into the central vein. So the job here is to make bile, you can see, to make the green stuff, and to clean the blood that has come from the GI tract. So those are the main roles. We'll talk about everything that's done by the liver. There's lots of important functions there. Sinusoids, do you remember that word? 5 functions of the liver that I need you to know for this class. Okay, first is bile production and secretion. So let's talk about bile for a while. Bile is a combination of bile salts, cholesterol, lecithin, and bilirubin. So you know cholesterol already. Lecithin is a fatty acid, a free fatty acid, a long chain of CH2, 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 CH2. You'll see it everywhere now that I've told it to you. Pay attention when you read labels, and I know you're going to start reading labels, right? Because we're talking a lot about nutrition and health in this class. Soy lecithin is the one. Soybeans are used for all kinds of stuff, not just tofu, not just soybeans, but extracted and used and reused, and soy lecithin is in tons of stuff. Every piece of chocolate I find has lecithin. I've been trying to find some without, and it's actually been a real challenge. I haven't been able to find any chocolate without soy lecithin. And I don't want soy, actually, because soy is always genetically modified. So it's something I'm trying to avoid in my diet, genetically modified foods. So it's hard to find soy that's organic and not modified. Bile salts, I'll show you in just a minute, and then bilirubin we'll talk about. So the function of bile is to remove heme and emulsify fats. Okay, so let's talk about the emulsification. This is the bile salt. You can look it up if you want to see the actual structure of it. But the bile salt, it is a salt. It not just Na+, but remember salts dissociate, or go into water. They dissociate. This is shows a non-polar side of the bile salt. Polar side. So giant fat globule. Which side is going to like the fat? The non-polar or the polar? And which side will like the water? Okay, polar likes the water, non-polar likes the fat. So these bile salts will hook on to the fat globule and emulsify it into smaller droplets. Okay, so this is emulsification, where the bile salt kind of protect the fat to say, oh, don't you worry, I'll protect you from the water around you, okay? This makes it then easier for a digestive enzyme, which is going to chop at the surface, right? A digestive enzyme has to come up to the edge of the fat globule. Now look at all the edges it has access to. So by making smaller pieces, we have increased the surface area for digestion with enzymes on these fats. Okay, just like the finger story we were talking about last time. So free bilirubin contains heme and is hydrophobic. Did you know this? Did you learn this? Bilirubin is in the what we just said. This is part of the bile, right? It contains heme and is hydrophobic. Heme comes from where? It comes from hemoglobin, right? It then becomes conjugated bilirubin and becomes therefore hydrophilic. Okay, this is important because in the intestines the bilirubin, which is hydrophilic, becomes urobilinogen, and now because it is hydrophilic, it likes the water and it can be excreted out of the body. If it's hydrophobic, it's going to want to stay. So to get rid of heme, by the way, is because you're getting rid of broken down red cells. You remember a red cell only lives how long? Like 4 months. So we have to continually make new red blood cells, remember? So the heme has to be removed. One of the things that we'll do is it will be removed through the bilirubin, and in the intestine bilirubin becomes urobilinogen. Urobilinogen is excreted in the feces or absorbed into the blood and excreted in the urine. When it comes in the feces, remember the heme has iron in it, so what color does it look? Feces are brown. Yes, thank you. But when it comes out into the urine, what color is the urine? Yellow, yellowish. Urobilinogen, uro meaning the urine, okay? So I will show you an animation so you can see how this works.
When old red blood cells rupture, the released hemoglobin is ingested by macrophages. The globin chains of hemoglobin are broken down to individual amino acids that are metabolized or used to build new proteins. Iron is released from the heme of hemoglobin. The remaining structure is converted to biliverdin, which is then converted into bilirubin. Iron is transported by transferrin in the blood to various tissues for storage, or to red bone marrow for making new hemoglobin. Free bilirubin is transported by albumin in the blood to the liver. Liver cells make conjugated bilirubin, which is excreted as part of the bile into the small intestine. Intestinal bacteria convert bilirubin into bilirubin derivatives, which contribute to the color of feces. Some of the bilirubin derivatives are absorbed into the blood and excreted from the kidneys in the urine.
Okay, this is how the book describes it. So here we have the liver. Here's the bile coming through. The left and right hepatic duct. The gallbladder, remember, stores bile for a time when we need it. It's going to be released if we eat what? Proteins, carbohydrates, or fats. Because we just said the bile is used for emulsification of fats. So we're going to release the bile when we have fat. Then the common bile duct meets up with the small intestine, right? You know that. If you don't remember all this anatomy, go review it again. Here's where the bilirubin is converted into urobilinogen. This we talked about good bacteria, right? Good gut bacteria. Okay, all the important things you should be eating. The urobilinogen ends up in the feces. Some of it is reabsorbed back into the hepatic portal vein through the vena cava and comes out to be cleaned through the kidneys. Now the kidneys filter it and then put it into the urine. All this is to help get rid of heme, and of course bile is to emulsify fats. All right, next. All that was about bile. Second function of the liver is to detoxify blood. You know this, right? The liver is used to detoxify. We excrete waste with the bile. Another reason to make it is to get stuff out of our body. We convert toxic waste into manageable waste. Okay, so something toxic to you would be like ammonia, which your body makes, not because you swallow ammonia, okay, but your body makes ammonia from the breakdown of proteins. The ammonia is toxic. You can imagine regular ammonia, right? The stuff you get at the grocery store is toxic, right? You can't drink it. And it becomes manageable, which means it becomes urea in your body so that your body can get rid of it out in the urine, and it's not as toxic. So it's the job of the blood to do that. Hydrophobic drugs, okay, those are not naturally occurring, but if we take hydrophobic drugs, and remember, number one way to take a drug is to swallow it, so that means it's hydrophobic if we're going to swallow it. They have to become hydrophilic so you can easily excrete them. So when you take a drug, your body doesn't want it, right? It says, what is this? We're going to detox, we're going to urinate this thing out of us, and the next day you have to take another one, right? Because your body doesn't want it. And of course maybe your body needs it, but that doesn't mean it's not a natural product, right? It's not something that your body is going to use and keep forever. It's going to use it and dump it, use it and dump it. I've heard that like the amount of Tylenol people take and excrete into toilets and ends up in the waste management plants is super duper high. Maybe somebody could do some research on that for us. Tell me if that's true. Number 3, how's macrophages? This is a liver cell in the corner. I don't know. It says liver cell, but really, that's like, this must be like a high school website I got this from. Right? You know the real word. Hepatocytes. How's macrophages? So we do a lot of blood flow through the liver, so that's a great place to put a bunch of macrophages. So remember, macrophages usually stay in the tissue to get their work done. Remember, your liver is huge. Put your hands on your rib cage, right at the top of your stomach, okay? Right where your rib cage kind of goes in there, underneath your armpits. That's like your whole liver. That's it. Imagine underneath your rib cage, your liver goes, it's from left to right, front to back. It is giant, huge. That's one of the things that amazed me most in anatomy is the size of the liver. And it can be really huge, and when you see it in a small person, it seems to take up a lot of space. And it does. The liver takes up a big space. Liver also has the storage of glycogen, which you know, fat. And if you didn't know that, now you know. And have you seen a liver? Even if you've seen just chicken liver, it's shiny, right? Pretty. It's so nice. It's like squishy and a really pretty brown color. It's got fat in it. It's got iron in it, which makes it the color. And it's got fat-soluble vitamins. So it has a big function. Synthesis of plasma proteins happens here. So remember albumin, your friend albumin. We make a lot of albumin in our liver cells, okay, in our hepatocyte. Now I'm reading that word, liver cell. Synthesis of plasma proteins, okay? Next on our list, the gallbladder. Here the liver is removed from the picture, and they are showing you the left and right. This is the right, this is the left. Hepatic ducts. Then the cystic duct, which comes from the gallbladder, meets the common bile duct, comes down to the small intestine here. Do you remember this? The sphincter of Oddi. Do you remember this one? It's got a little sphincter here that opens and closes to allow the contents from this duct and the contents of the pancreatic duct into the small intestine. So when food arrives, there's a signal to release the contents here, the bile and the pancreatic juice, and open the sphincter so that contents can come in. This is the duodenum. Stomach is also removed. We already learned about the pancreas when we talked about the endocrine system, because we were interested in the islets, the alpha cells and the beta cells, right? Now we're going to look at the Asner cells here that secrete pancreatic enzymes into the pancreatic duct. Okay? Can you live without a pancreas? No, it's not going to happen. Can you live without a thyroid? Yes. Sorry, need a drink of water. Yes, you can live without a thyroid. You can take thyroid hormones, but there are so many hormones produced by the pancreas, and there are so many digestive enzymes that usually someone can't survive. Pancreatic cancer, by the way, you've heard of, right? Nasty pancreatic cancer. People get it and they die, unfortunately, within a year, unless it's cured, which is, of course, really difficult to do. And it spreads, metastasizes very quickly. Let's see what's on the next page. Oops, wrong way. So the gallbladder stores bile between meals. Excess cholesterol can crystallize and form gallstones. Ever heard of gallstones? Have you had them? These can block the common bile duct. Then what would happen? If it blocked the common bile duct, what would happen to the flow of bile? It would stop, right? Wouldn't have any. People tell me that gallstones are very painful. And how do you get rid of them? They can do a couple things. They can go in and remove them. They used to cut people open. Now they just do that cool laparoscopy to go in and remove them. They can also try to shake them apart with sonic waves. So if you have a gallbladder story, tell us about it. Some people who continue to get gallstones eventually have their gallbladder removed. And listen, that would be like, for me, I would say that's a last resort, okay? Some people suffer constantly from this, and it helps them to finally get it removed. But I wouldn't recommend it. Keep it if you can, okay? And changes in diets usually help people. Not that they eat a lot of cholesterol. That's not because they eat a lot of cholesterol. But imagine if you don't have a gallbladder, then you got to watch out, because when you eat fatty food, right, you don't have all the extra from the gallbladder to come in and help you digest. So after a gallbladder is removed, people have to be very careful about what they eat, okay? Or it causes them a lot of pain. And remember, so many nutrients are fat soluble, and if we don't digest them, we don't emulsify them, digest them, you won't get the important fat soluble vitamins. Okay, what's next? The pancreas. I have notes. How about I look at them? You look at yours. I'll look at mine. The pancreas. It adds secretions to the small intestine. There are duct cells. So we saw that space of the islets. The other space has all the other cells for releasing enzymes, and sodium bicarbonate come from the duct cells. The purpose of the sodium bicarbonate, is it an acid or is it a base? It's a base. So what would it do to the pH of the small intestine? It would make it go up. It would increase. Perfect, because we've just come from the stomach where the pH is 2, 1 or 2, sure. And then we get to the small intestine, we've got to increase the pH. This is how it's done, okay? We usually say the small intestinal pH is around 6. Doesn't even quite make it to 7, but it's the sodium bicarbonate. That's the same thing in the kitchen, right? That's the baking soda. This helps to raise the pH of the chyme in the intestine. Now that the pH is back to 6, then enzymes can start working. The Asner cells release 3 enzymes. Pancreatic amylase. So remember we talked about amylase before. We did salivary amylase. Same thing, except released by the pancreas. often we call it pancreatin. It digests carbohydrates. There's also several protein enzymes. The one we're going to talk about is trypsin. And there are lipid enzymes, and the one that we know the most about is called lipase. Okay, there it is, ASE. The trypsin doesn't have an ACE, but everything else has, of course, an ACE. Most of these enzymes are released as inactive zymogens. So remember the word pepsinogen? I told you it became, if you see an ogen, that means it's a precursor, it comes before. So these are released as zymogens and are inactive, so that when they reach the intestine, they become active. And this is, of course, to prevent self-digestion of the pancreas, right? So we release these hormones, or these enzymes, and they become active when they reach the intestine. Okay, let's give you a group question without your group. Najib experiences a sharp pain in his upper right abdomen after eating a high-fat meal. Also, he has noted that his feces are grayish-white instead of brown. What is the most likely cause of his symptoms? And explain why each of these symptoms occurs with this condition. Okay? Pause the show. Think about this. Do some research. Okay. Sharp pain. Upper right abdomen. Where's the pictures? I need the picture. Upper right. So remember, in this picture, this is right and this is left. Upper right, probably gonna be the gallbladder. Yep, someplace in here. And high fat, definitely something related to bile, right? Because fat, bile go together for emulsification. So he probably has gallstones. Okay, very painful when he eats fats. That's one of the signs. If he has white, grayish white feces instead of brown, that means that no bile is getting released, right? So if he has no, because if there's gallstones, say here in the cystic duct, would the person still be releasing bile into the small intestine? They would, right? Because it could still come up here from the hepatic ducts. In fact, that's how it works for people who have this part removed, the gallbladder removed, then you're not going to see anything released from here, right? But you would still see release from the liver. So where is his block? Is his block here at the cystic ducts or here at the hepatic ducts? Or here at the common bile duct? If his feces are grayish white instead of brown, it says, he's probably got a block here at the common bile duct. Maybe right here. So they can actually go in with, all their microscopic, really cool stuff into here and remove it. If they think he's going to continue to have them, and if he continues to have them, they might just remove the gallbladder. And usually that prevents the excess buildup that happens. See, what is the most likely cause of his symptoms? Now I'm just reading our notes here. Yes, common bile duct probably is blocked. Explain why each of these symptoms occurs with this condition. There you go. So he has the pain, he has the fat when he eats, and the feces are brown. All this backs up the, what else, let's see, if everything backs up, right, let's say we plug the common bile duct here, what happens to all the bile? Now the liver doesn't know that this stuff is not getting out, so it continues to release and make, right, but it all backs up, and what happens to that extra bile? Goes back into the liver, out into the blood, and it ends up, do you know this? Being seen on the skin and the whites of the eyes. Have you heard of this? So the sclera of the eye becomes what color? Yellow. Skin becomes yellow. And the person has, what do we call it? Jaundice, right? So someone who has liver problems like hepatitis often are yellowish skin, yellow eyes, because their liver is not working well to get rid of the bile. Could be jaundice due to this reason. Jaundice is very common in babies when they're born because their livers are immature and haven't been working. Remember, there's a bypass for the liver in the fetus. So it hasn't been working, and they come out oftentimes looking kind of yellowish with jaundice. So jaundice is the skin yellowing, and it could be for several reasons. So Najib might have yellowish sclera of his eyes, which could be another clue for us. Okay, let's see what's next. Next, done. The regulation of stomach function. This should be empty, so you can fill this in. We want the hormone, where it's made, and its action on the stomach. Okay, so now we've moved on from the pancreas. We've moved on from the liver. Now we're going to talk about regulating the stomach. Gastrin is the hormone made by G cells in the stomach, and its action is to stimulate the stomach. Easy. I love this word. Gastrin, stomach, G cells. Thank you. Whoever made those names. All the students say thank you. Somatostatin, not so helpful, thank you. D cells of the stomach make somatostatin. And it inhibits the stomach. Okay, perfect. You got the pair, right? One makes it go, one makes it stop. Negative feedback. Excellent story. CCK stands for cholecystokinin. You need to know CCK. You should know the word cholecystokinin too. You can write it down. Look it up. Look it up. Cholecystokinin. It's made in the duodenum, and it inhibits the stomach. So think about that. Food arrives, we don't call it food. We call it chyme, right? Chyme comes from the stomach into the duodenum, and it then inhibits the stomach because it says, hey, slow down. We got to take our time in the small intestine. This is where most of the digestion happens. Look at all these enzymes we've got. No rush. Okay, so this slows the stomach down. And then there's another one called glucagon-like peptide 1. Another thumbs down. I don't like that one. I don't like the name of this. Glucagon-like peptide 1. That's not very creative. Where is it made? The small intestine, and it also inhibits the stomach. Okay, so these are the 4 hormones you need to know for the stomach. And notice they all inhibit, except one, gastrin. Okay, 3 phases of gastric function. So let's read through these and I'll show you the animation. Okay, first is the cephalic phase, where you smell, you see, you taste food, think about food. Are you hungry? Talk about pizza. Oh yeah, found a good pizza place. Thin crust, I like thin crust. Yep, nice and cheesy. Okay, so does that make you hungry? Turning on the vagus nerve when we do that. The stomach turns on. Then we get the gastric phase. Now the food is in the stomach, causing continued secretions, right? So your stomach, when your stomach growls, right? It's growling because it's empty. It's starting to turn on, expecting the food to come. So then the food does come during the gastric phase, but by the time it reaches the intestines, say 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, we have to slow down. So the chyme in the duodenum causes the stomach to slow, and all those hormones we just talked about will be turned on or off depending on what we need.
Regulation of stomach secretion is divided into 3 phases: cephalic, gastric, and intestinal. In the cephalic phase, the taste or smell of food, tactile sensation of food in the mouth, or thought of food sends nervous impulses to the medulla oblongata. These impulses cause parasympathetic neurons via the vagus nerves to stimulate secretion of hydrochloric acid and pepsin in the stomach. The parasympathetic stimulation also results in secretion of gastrin from the lower part of the stomach. This hormone travels through the bloodstream and further stimulates hydrochloric acid and pepsin secretion in the upper and middle parts of the stomach. In the gastric phase of gastric secretion, food has entered and distended the stomach. This distension activates a parasympathetic reflex via the medulla oblongata and also has a direct stimulatory effect on the gastric glands. The result is continued secretion of hydrochloric acid and pepsin. In the intestinal phase of gastric secretion, chyme has entered the duodenum, so gastric secretion is no longer needed. When the chyme contains lipids from the digestion of fats or contains enough hydrochloric acid to bring its pH below 2, gastric secretion is inhibited. The lipids and hydrogen ions inhibit gastric secretion by 3 simultaneous actions. First, they cause impulses to go to the medulla oblongata to decrease parasympathetic stimulation of the gastric glands. Secondly, they set up local reflexes via neurons in the wall of the gut that decrease gastric secretion. Thirdly, they cause the release of 3 local hormones which travel via the circulation to the gastric glands and inhibit their secretion.
All right, we have pancreas and bile regulation. So we just did stomach regulation. Now we do pancreas. The duct cells, which remember make sodium bicarbonate, are stimulated by secretin from the duodenum. Easy, okay? Secretin from the duodenum tells it to be secreted. The acinar cells are stimulated by CCK from the duodenum. The result is pancreatic enzymes are released. All this makes sense, right? As the chyme reaches the duodenum, it says, please release sodium bicarbonate and all your enzymes. Thank you. And the bioregulation is also done the same way. It's both secretin and cholecystokinin that stimulate the bile release. Okay? I think this is simple. Next topic is the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. So we begin when you eat a cracker in your mouth, it's digested with salivary amylase. And we swallow it though pretty fast. So there's really nothing in the stomach to work on it, right? Because the stomach has a low pH, amylase doesn't work there. We're kind of working on the protein in the stomach. We do have a low pH in the stomach, which will start to digest food, but it's really not going to chop it up like we want. So we have to wait again then until we get to the pancreatic amylase, which comes out in the small intestine, right? So we're going to digest carbohydrates in the small intestine again. Then, remember I told you about the brush border, right? Those small microvilli also have enzymes in them that do the final digestion into the smallest piece. So remember at the beginning of the last lecture we talked about the smallest piece is a simple sugar, a monosaccharide. It is now transported across the epithelial cells of the intestinal wall into the blood capillaries. Okay, so carbohydrates are broken down into monosaccharides, transported across the epithelial cell into the blood capillaries, which is in the submucosal layer, right? Next, the digestion and absorption of protein. Of course, in the mouth, nothing. But we swallow, goes to the stomach, and that's where we start all the pepsin action. Then we get to the small intestine, and we get trypsin, which I told you about. Another one is called chymotrypsin, and another one is called elastase. You need to know these 3. Trypsin, chymotrypsin, and elastase. These are from the pancreas, and they're going to start digesting the proteins even more. Okay, in the small intestine. There's another one, a 4th one you need to know, called carboxypeptidase. So really this is 5, right? Pepsin, trypsin, chymotrypsin, elastase, and carboxypeptidase. Yeah, I love this stuff. Of course I love this stuff, right? The physiology professor. Then another one. Yes, that makes 6. Aminopeptidase from the brush border enzymes. Okay, the brush border has the last enzyme to chop that dipeptide. Remember at the beginning of the first lecture on this, we showed the picture of the dipeptide becoming 1 amino acid. And now that amino acid is transported into the blood just like the sugars. Okay, so it goes across the epithelial cell into the submucosal layer where it meets a blood vessel, which takes it away. And of course, remember, all this goes directly to the liver to be detoxified. Fats. Now, fats we don't do in the stomach, we don't do in the mouth, we don't do in the stomach, we don't do anything with them until we get to the small intestine where they meet the bile, which emulsifies them. Now, Emulsification is not digestion. All it is making pieces smaller. That's it. We have to wait for the enzyme to come. So we digest it with pancreatic lipase. Here's a picture of how the lipase works. It takes the triglyceride, and the picture on the right takes the triglyceride, which remember has a glycerol and fatty acids attached, right? 1, 2, 3. We chop it. In this case, we're chopping into a monoglyceride. What's mono mean? 1. And 1, 2 free fatty acids. Okay? Then, here's what happens. Those monoglycerides, now this picture is looking at the lumen of the small intestine. Here's the epithelial cells that we have to cross, right, to get to where we want to go, which is the submucosal layer. Notice this submucosal layer we're looking at here doesn't show the blood vessel. It's there, but it's not shown because the fats are not going to go there. So the fats are going to go into the lymphatic system, which then go to be cleaned before they head to the liver. Okay, they have to go through all of the lymph nodes. Interesting. Don't ask me why. Perhaps you could look up a reason why that happens. And of course, some things we don't know why. Our bodies are just made that way, and we're not clever enough to figure it out. Okay? The triglycerides are the bile salts, the lipase broken into fatty acids, and monoglycerides. Those are separately transported. See these little things here sticking up? What are those? Name the little bumpy parts on these cells. They are called microvilli. So we transport fatty acids, we transport monoglycerides, then they get back together as triglycerides with proteins, now called a chylomicron. New word. A lot of new words in these lectures, right? Chylomicrons, make your flashcards, okay? Chylomicrons then are released, looks like this is exocytosis, right? Then they come into the lacteal, where they're going to be taken off into the thoracic duct, and along the way go through lymph nodes. Okay, seems a little complicated, but these triglycerides don't like the water. So when you add a protein to it, it makes it protected, and now it's going to travel easily through the blood and the lymphatic system. Okay, so the subunits are transported subunits are the free fatty acids and the monoglycerides. They are transported into the epithelial cell. They reorganize lipids and by adding proteins to them and calling them chylomicrons. Okay, here's the CH again with a K sound. These are released into the lymph, not like the blood, with the sugars and the amino acids. Okay, so this is how the story is different. Plus, it's a reorganize. Okay, so that makes us two different things about those stories. All right, what else is on my slide here? Anything else? No, that's it. Last slide. Lipoproteins. You've heard of these? When you get your blood tested, they do the triglycerides, the HDLs, LDLs, VLDLs, DL, la la la. Yes. The purpose of these lipoproteins is to carry fat through the blood. Remember, the fats are hydrophobic. They don't like the blood because it's mostly water, so you got to have something to carry it around. The low-density lipoproteins, the LDLs, transport lipids to the tissues to be stored. So it's important that when you get your triglycerides tested and your fats tested that you have them check these specifically, okay? And the high-density lipoproteins, and they're called high-density, low-density because of how they look when they test for them, okay? Low-density, high-density is how they show up. The HDLs are transporting lipids to the liver to be degraded. So if there's a high level of HDLs, the doctor doesn't get too upset. If there's a high level of LDLs, the doctor gets upset. Okay? Let's see. I think that's it. We're all done. Good job.